Да догоняй ты уже его! Да что такое, ё-моё! Давай, давай, что ты как ежик в тумане бродишь? Пасуй! Пасуй, бей! Ну обводи его, обводи!
Пап, смотри!
Славик, не мешай!
Ну потрогай!
Ну, Славик! Ай!
Ежик!
Тебе что, своих игрушек мало, что ли?
Ну это-то настоящий!
Настоящий. Откуда ты вообще его притащил?
Мне мальчик во дворе дал.
Давай, 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 бей! Подарил, что ли?
Нет, мы обменялись. Он мне дал ежика, а я ему билетик.
Какой еще билетик?
Лотерейный. Пап, надо ему что-нибудь дать.
А откуда у тебя лотерейный билетик?
Я его купил.
О! Ну-ка, ну-ка, ну-ка.
Ой, папа, ежик под диван полез.
Так зачем же ты отдал свой билет? А вдруг он что-нибудь выиграл?
Он выиграл.
Как выиграл? И что выиграл?
Да телевизор.
Как телевизор? А ты откуда знаешь? Так, а ну-ка иди сюда.
Я его проверил по газете. Там все циферки совпали. И серия та же. Я уже умею проверять, пап. Я же взрослый.
Взрослый? Ты взрослый, да? Ты телевизоры на ежиков меняешь.
Но я подумал, что телевизор у нас уже есть, а ежика нет.
Так, где этот мальчик? Как его зовут?
Он в соседнем доме живет.
Зовут как?
Сеня.
Доставай своего ежика. Где он там?
Он ползает.
Давай, хватай.
Нет, нет.
Ай, колется.
А куда мы?
Все, пойдем обратно менять.
Нет, не пойду. Не хочу телевизор, хочу ежика.
Значит так, поменяем обратно, я тебе куплю 10 новых ежиков.
Не купишь.
Вот этот мальчик. Ну я кого спрашиваю? Этот мальчик? Где билет?
У меня нет билета.
Значит так, на, забирай свою колючку, а мне отдавай мой билет.
У меня нет билета.
Мальчик, где мой билет? Куда ты его дел?
Я из него голубя сделал.
Это что? Это вот мой телевизор улетел?
Не телевизор, а голубь.
Ты когда его купил?
А, еще в садике.
А проверял когда?
Вчера.
Это же другой тираж! Тираж другой!
Ну и что? Зато все циферки совпали. Пап, ты не расстраивайся. Сенька говорит, что он все равно отдает
Спасибо, Сеня.
Живет у нас под креслом еж, колючий тихий ежик. На щетку очень он похож, когда не видно ножек. Ты понимаешь, для чего у ежика иголки, чтобы не трогали его мальчишки или волки. А если яблоки найдет он у тебя на елке, он 3-4 украдет, надев их на иголки. Живет у нас под креслом еж, колючий тихий ежик. На щетку очень он похож, на щетку очень он похож, когда не видно ножек. Если яблоки найдет он у тебя на елке, он 3-4 украдет, надев их на иголки. Живет у нас под креслом еж, колючий тихий ежик. На щетку очень он похож, на щетку очень он похож, когда не видно ножек, когда не видно ножек.
ಇದು ಸತ್ಯದ ಬೇಟೆ. ಸತ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಕೊಡಬಹುದಾದ ಒಂದು ರೂಪ. ಸತ್ಯ ಅಂದರೆ ಯಾವುದು, ಸತ್ಯ ಅಂದ್ರೇನು ಅಂತ ತಿಳಿಯೋ ಕಾತುರ. ಯಾವುದೂ ಶಾಶ್ವತ ಅಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋದೇ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಸತ್ಯ. ಆದರೆ ಸತ್ಯ ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಶಾಶ್ವತ ಅನ್ನೋ ಮಾತು ಇದೆ. ಪ್ರತಿ ನಿಮಿಷವೂ ಈ ಭೂಮಿ ಮೇಲಿನ ಮಾನವನ ಮನಸ್ಸುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಸತ್ಯಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ನಡೆಯುವಂತಹ ಹುಡುಕಾಟದ, ತಳಮಳದ, ಒದ್ದಾಟದ ಸತ್ಯಕಥೆ ಇದು. ಈ ಚಿತ್ರದ ನಾಯಕನ ಹೆಸರು ಕೂಡ ಸತ್ಯ ಅಂತ. ಆತ ತನ್ನೊಳಗಿರೋ ಒಂದು ಸತ್ಯ ಹುಡುಕ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ. ಆ ಸತ್ಯ ಏನು, ಹೇಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಅವನಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಅವನದೇ ರೂಪ ಕೊಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾನೆ. ಇಂಥ ಹುಡುಕಾಟದ ಒದ್ದಾಟನೇ ಈ ವಿಚಿತ್ರ ಚಿತ್ರ. ಹೀಗೆ ಸತ್ಯ ತನ್ನೊಳಗಿರೋ ಸತ್ಯವನ್ನು ಹುಡುಕೋಕೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು. ಈ ಮನುಷ್ಯ ಅನ್ನೋ ವ್ಯಾಪಾರಿ ಎಲ್ಲದನ್ನು ಮಾರಾಟ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋ ಈ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಸತ್ಯನೂ ಎಲ್ಲಾದರೂ ಮಾರಾಟಕ್ಕಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋ ನಂಬಿಕೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಇವನು ಬಂದಿರಬಹುದು. ವ್ಯಾಪಾರಂ ದ್ರೋಹ ಚಿಂತನಂ. ಇಂಥ ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಸತ್ಯ ಸಿಗಬಹುದಾ? ಇಲ್ಲ, ಮಾರ್ಕೆಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿಗಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಇನ್ನು ಮಾಲ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ? ಹೌದು, ಸತ್ಯ ಮಾಲ್ಗಳು, ಕ್ಲಬ್ಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ಹುಡುಕ್ತಾ. ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ತುಂಬ ಹಳೇದು. ಇತಿಹಾಸದಷ್ಟೇ ಹಳೇದು ಈ ಬಜಾರ್ ಮಾರ್ಕೆಟ್ಗಳು. ಇಂಥ ಐತಿಹಾಸಿಕ ಸ್ಥಳಗಳಲ್ಲೇ ಸಿಗಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದಮೇಲೆ ಮೊನ್ನೆ ಬಂದಿರೋ ಮಾಲಲ್ಲಿ ಸತ್ಯ ಇದೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಮಾಲ್ಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ಸಿಗದೆ ಇರೋ ಸತ್ಯನ ನಮ್ಮ ಸತ್ಯ ಮೀಡಿಯಾಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಹುಡುಕ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ತೀರ್ಮಾನ ಮಾಡ್ದ. ಆವಾಗ
Does it look good already? Okay. Jumbo Scampi for limited.
ಅಷ್ಟಕ್ಕೂ ಸತ್ಯ ಎಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾನೆ? ಸರಿ, ಹೀಗೆ ಹುಚ್ಚುಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ತಿರುಗೋಕೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ದ ನಮ್ಮ ಸತ್ಯ. ಅದನ್ನ ನೋಡಿನೋ ಕೇಳೋ ಅವನ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬಂದು ಸಮಾಧಾನ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಅನ್ಕೋಬೇಡಿ, ಅವನ ಮೊಬೈಲ್ಗೆ ಕಾಲ್ ಮಾಡಿ,
ದೇಶ ಸುತ್ತಪ್ಪ, ಸತ್ಯ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದ್ರು ಸಿಗಬಹುದು, 190 ಹಾಕೋ, ಸತ್ಯ ಸುಳ್ಳು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಿತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆಚೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಮಿಸ್ಡ್ ಕಾಲ್ ಕೊಟ್ರೆ ಫೋನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಲ್ವಾ? ಮಗ, ನಿನ್ನ ಹುಡುಗಿ ಯಾರ ಜೊತೆನೋ ಓಡಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ಲು. ನಿನಗೆ ಈಗ ಜೀವನ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಲವ್, ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹಳ್ಳಿಗೆ ಹೋಗೋ ಸಿಕ್ತಾನೆ ಸತ್ಯ.
ಯಾರೋ ಒಂದು ಐಡಿಯಾನೂ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು, ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರಲ್ಲ, ಹಳ್ಳೀಲಿ ಅಂತ. ನಮ್ಮ ಸತ್ಯನ ಜನ್ಮಸ್ಥಳ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸತ್ಯದ ಉಗಮ ಇರಬಹುದು ಅನ್ನೋ ಯೋಚನೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಇವನಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಹೀಗೆ ರಸ್ತೆಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ಹುಡುಕ್ತಾ ಇವನ್ ಫೋಟೋ ಅಂಟಿಸ್ತಾ ಅವನ ಊರಿನ ದಾರಿ ಹುಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೊರಟ. ಪರಿಚಯ ಇದ್ದವ್ರು ಯಾರು ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದ್ರು ಅವರನ್ನೂ ಕೇಳ್ದ. ಹಾಗೆಲ್ಲ ಅವನಿಗೆ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು ಉತ್ತರ,
ಇಲ್ಲಪ್ಪ ಸತ್ಯ. ಇವರು ಸತ್ಯನ ಮುಂಚೆನೇ ನೋಡಿದ್ರು ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ.
ಅವರು ಇವನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರು, ಇವನು ತಾನು ಹುಡುಕ್ತಾ ಇರೋ ಸತ್ಯಕ್ಕೆ ಲಿಂಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋನು. ಹೀಗೆ ಇವನ ಡಬ್ಬ ಜರ್ನಿ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇವನಿಗೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕೋರು ಏನೇನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಅಂದರೆ,
ಏನ್ ಸತ್ಯಣ್ಣ ಕಳೆದೋಗಿದೆ?
ಏನ್ ಸತ್ಯಣ್ಣ ಗುರುತೇ ಸಿಗಲ್ಲ?
ಹಿಂಗೆ ಹೋಗೋ, ಸಿಕ್ಕದ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಬಂದು ತೋರ್ಸೋ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಬರ್ಲಿ, ಕುಂಬಳಕಾಯಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೊಡಿತೀನಿ.
ಸತ್ಯ, ಸುತ್ಕೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಗಟ್ಟಿ, ಅನಾಹುತ ಆಗೋದು ಬೇಡ, ಹೊರಟ್ಬಿಡು.
ಏಯ್ ವಾಲೈ,
ಲೂಸ್ ಇದ್ದಂಗಿದಾನೆ.
ಈ ಅಪ್ಪನೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡ್ದಂಗೆ ಐತಲ್ಲ.
ಸರಿ ಹೋಯ್ತು.
ಇದು ಸತ್ಯ ಸಿಕ್ಕೋರ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಸತ್ಯ ಯಾರು, ಎಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾನೆ ಅಂತ ಕೇಳಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕು ಉತ್ತರ. ಹೀಗೆ ಅಲಿಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, ಅರೆ ಸಿನಿಮಾ ಕೊನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕ್ಯಾರೆಕ್ಟ್ರು.
ಸಂಸಾರ ದುಸ್ಸಾರ, ಅದನ್ನ ಅರಿತು ಮಂದಿ ಬಿದ್ದಾರ. ಈ ಸಂಸಾರ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಏನದ? ಬಂಡಿಯೊಳಗ ಗುಡ್ಡ ಐತೋ ಕಾಣ, ಬಂಡಿ ಸೇರಿ ಗುಡ್ಡವಾಯ್ತು ಕಾಡ. ಸಂಸಾರ ಹಿಂಗ ಕಾಣುತ್ತಮ್ಮ, ಬಂಡಿ ಸೇರಿ ಗುಡ್ಡಾಯ್ತೋ ತಮ್ಮ ಸಂಸಾರ. ಏಯ್ ಬಾರೋ ತಮ್ಮ ಬಾ. ಬಂಡಿ ಸೇರಿ ಗುಡ್ಡಾಯ್ತೋ ತಮ್ಮ. ಯಾರೋ ತಮ್ಮ ಇದು? ಏನಿದು?
ಈ ಸತ್ಯ ಯಾರು? ನಮಗೂ ಈ ಸತ್ಯಕ್ಕೂ ಏನ್ ಸಂಬಂಧ?
ಕೇಳೋ ತಮ್ಮ, ಈ ಭೂಮಿ ಮ್ಯಾಲ ನೀನ ಸತ್ಯ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಇನ್ಯಾವ ಸತ್ಯನ ಹುಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೊಂಟಿಲೇ?
ಸ್ವಾಮಿ, ನಾನ್ ಸತ್ಯ ಅಲ್ದಲೇ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ನಮ್ಮೊಳಗೊಂದ್ ಸತ್ಯ ಇದೆ. ನಾನಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರು ಅದೆಲ್ಲಾ ಕಡೆ ಇದ್ದೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಈ ತರ ಇರ್ಬೋದಾ ಅಂತ
ಅವನು ಹುಡುಕೋಕ ಯಾರ್ಯಾರು ಏನೆಲ್ಲ ತ್ರಾಸ್ ತಗೊಂಡಾರ. ಕೋಟಿ ರೂಪ ಕೊಟ್ರು ಆ ಸತ್ಯ ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಕಂಡಿಲ್ಲೋ ತಮ್ಮ. ಕತ್ತಿಯಲ್ಲ ಏನ್ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ನಿನಗ ಕೋಟಿ ಒಳಗ ನಿಂದು ಒಂದಾಯ್ತು ಬಿಡೋ ತಮ್ಮ.
ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಸತ್ಯ ಸಿಗಲ್ಲ ಅಂತನಾ?
ಕೇಳೋ ತಮ್ಮ, ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದರಲ್ಲೂ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಬ್ಬರಲ್ಲೂ ಸತ್ಯ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಇದ್ದ ಇರ್ತದ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಮಂದಿ ಅದು ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಮೂಲೆಯೊಳಗಿಟ್ಟು ಅದಕ್ಕೊಂದು ರೂಪ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ಭಕ್ತಿ ಭಾವದಿಂದ ಕೈ ಮುಗಿದಾರ. ಅದಕ್ಕ ಮನಸ್ಸು ಖಾಲಿ ನೋಡು, ಅದಾ ಕಲಿಯುಗ. ನೀನಾ ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ ತಮ್ಮ, ನೀನು ಪಟ ಹಿಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅದನ್ನು ಹುಡುಕ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹತ್ತಿಯಲ್ಲ. ಭೇಷ್ ಮಗನ ಭೇಷ್.
ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ಸತ್ಯ
ಸತ್ಯ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಸುಳ್ಳದನ. ಮಸೆ ಇದಾ ನೋಡ್ ಸತ್ಯ, ರೂಪ ಇಲ್ಲದಕ್ಕ ಆಸೆನೂ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಆಸೆ ಇಲ್ಲದಕ್ಕ ಮಂದಿ ಶೂನ್ಯಾಂತರ. ಈ ಶೂನ್ಯನ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶೂನ್ಯನ ಸತ್ಯ. ಶೂನ್ಯ ಆಗೋ ತಾಕತ್ ನಿನ್ನೊಳಗಿದ್ರ ನೀನ ಸತ್ಯ. ಜಗತ್ನಲ್ಲ ಬದಲಾಗದ್ದು ಅಂದ್ರ ಸತ್ಯ ಒಂದ. ಶೂನ್ಯ ಆಗೋ ತಾಕತ್ ನಿನ್ನೊಳಗಿದ್ರ ನೀನ ಸತ್ಯ. ಶೂನ್ಯ ಆಗೋ ತಾಕತ್ ನಿನ್ನೊಳಗಿದ್ರ ನೀನ ಸತ್ಯ. ಶೂನ್ಯ ಆಗೋ ತಾಕತ್ ನಿನ್ನೊಳಗಿದ್ರ ನೀನ ಸತ್ಯ.
ಸತ್ಯ ಅವರು ಸಮ್ ಅನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ಕಿರುಚಿತ್ರವನ್ನು ತಯಾರಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಒಂದು ತತ್ವವನ್ನು ಕಥೆಯಾಗಿ ಹೇಳೋದು ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಕಷ್ಟ. ಶಂಕರಾಚಾರ್ಯರ ತತ್ವವನ್ನು ಕಥೆಯಾಗಿ ಹೇಳೋದು, ರಾಮಾನುಜಾಚಾರ್ಯರು, ವಿವೇಕಾನಂದನೋ ಇಂಥ ತತ್ವವನ್ನು ಕಥೆ ಮಾಡೋದಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ತುಂಬ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಸಾಹಸ ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಚಾಲೆಂಜ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಬಹುದು. ಇಂಥದ್ದೊಂದು ಚಾಲೆಂಜನ್ನು ಸ್ವೀಕರಿಸಿಯೇ ಸತ್ಯ ಅವರು ಒಂದು ಕಥೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಹೊರಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಛಾಯಾಗ್ರಹಣ ಅತ್ಯುತ್ತಮವಾಗಿದೆ. ಸಂಕಲನ ಅಂತೂ ಆಧುನಿಕ ಸಂಕಲನ ತಂತ್ರಗಳು ಅಂತೇನು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಸಂಕಲನ ತಂತ್ರಗಳು, ಇದಿಷ್ಟನ್ನು ಬಳಸಿಕೊಂಡು ಅಪರೂಪದ ಕೆಲಸವನ್ನೇ ಸಂಕಲನಕಾರರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಿನ್ನೆಲೆ ಸಂಗೀತವೂ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಗಟ್ಟಿಯಾಗಿದೆ. ಆದರೆ ಸಿನಿಮಾದ ಅಂತ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬ ಸೂಫಿ ಪಂಥದ ಒಬ್ಬ ತತ್ವಜ್ಞಾನಿಯ ಆ ಥರದ ಒಬ್ಬ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಯ ಒಂದು ಪಾತ್ರವನ್ನು ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಆವರೆಗೆ ನಡೆದ ಕತೆಗೆ ಧ್ವನಿಪೂರ್ಣ ವಿವರವನ್ನು ಹೇಳುವ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಹೋಗ್ತಾರೆ. ಹೀಗಾಗಿ ಯಾವ ತತ್ವವನ್ನು ಇಡೀ ಕತೆ ಹೇಳಕ್ ಹೊರಟಿರುತ್ತೋ, ಸತ್ಯದ ಹುಡುಕಾಟ ಅನ್ನುವ ಕತೆ, ಸತ್ಯ ಅನ್ನುವುದು ಶೂನ್ಯ ಅನ್ನುವ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಸತ್ಯವನ್ನ, ಸೂಫಿ ಪಂಥದ ಸತ್ಯವನ್ನ ಹೇಳುವ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತು ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಅತ್ಯುತ್ತಮವಾದ ಛಾಯಾಗ್ರಹಣ ಇದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ, ಅತ್ಯುತ್ತಮವಾದ ಸಂಕಲನ ಇದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಈ ಮಾತುಗಳು ತಲೆಯ ಮೇಲೆ ಹೋಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರುವಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ನೋಡುಗನನ್ನು ಒಳಗೊಳ್ಳುವ ಬದಲಾಗಿ ನೋಡುಗನನ್ನ ಚಿತ್ರದಿಂದ ದೂರ ಇರಿಸಿಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಪ್ರಾಯಶಃ ಸತ್ಯ ಅವರು ಹೀಗೆ ಪ್ರೇಕ್ಷಕರನ್ನ ದೂರ ಇರಿಸುವ ಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಬದಲಾಗಿ ಪ್ರೇಕ್ಷಕರನ್ನ ಒಳಗೊಳ್ಳುವ ಕ್ರಮದ ಕಥೆಯನ್ನ ಹೆಣೆದರೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಲಾಭ ಅಥವಾ ಇನ್ನೂ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಪರಿಣಾಮ ಉಂಟಾಗಬಹುದೇನೋ. ಸತ್ಯ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಸಿನಿಮಾ ಮಾಡುವ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಇದೆ. ಸಿನಿಮಾದ ಅಂತ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ತಾವು ಹೇಳಬೇಕಾದ ಸಂದೇಶವನ್ನ ದೃಶ್ಯೀಕರಿಸುವಲ್ಲಿ ಸಣ್ಣ ವೈಫಲ್ಯವನ್ನ ಈ ಸಿನಿಮಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮುಂದಿನ ಸಿನಿಮಾಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರಿಂದ ಇನ್ನೂ ಉತ್ತಮ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಆಗುವ ಸಾಧ್ಯತೆ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಅಂದ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಈವರೆಗೆ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿರುವ ಸಿನಿಮಾಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಾ ನೆನಪಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಉಳಿಯುವಂತಹ ಸಿನಿಮಾ ಅನ್ನೋದರಲ್ಲಿ ಅನುಮಾನ ಇಲ್ಲ.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the impact of online shopping on the UK High Street. I'm Margherita Saraolo. I'm an outreach officer working for the UK Data Service based in Manchester at JISC. And I'm presenting today with Les Dolega. He's a lecturer in Geographical Data Science for the Consumer Data Research Centre at the University of Liverpool. This is just a quick overview today. I will introduce the phase 2 of the Big Data Network and the Consumer Data Research Centre in particular. And then Les will tell you more about his research on e-resilience, including the data and methodology he used. And then we will finish off with some questions. Right, so the ESRC has created a big data network which is divided in 3 phases. As part of the phase 2, it is investing in the establishment of data research centres with a focus on business and local government data. These 3 centres are the BLG Data Research, as you can see, so the ESRC Business and Local Government Data Research Centre, based at the University of Essex, the Consumer Data Research Centre, which I'm going to tell you more about later, and the Urban Big Data Centre, based at the University of Glasgow. So these 3 research centres make data routinely collected by business and local government organisations accessible for research, and they benefit to data owners and society, and they always ensure that individuals' identities are safeguarded. So the UK Data Service has a big data team called Big Data Network Support. So the ESRC has invested in us to enable research to make the most out of these data for knowledge exchange and impact. And we support and coordinate the activities between the 3 data research centres. Our aims are to unify data discovery across the phase 2 of the Big Data Network collections. We encourage the sharing of information and expertise across these centres and coordinate user training and capacity building in big data analytics for researchers using the data. Just a few words about the CDRC in particular, because Les does work for the CDRC. They combine expertise from 4 different universities, or researchers within those universities, at the University of Leeds, the University College London, University of Liverpool, and the University of Oxford. They do provide data that cover a range of topics concerning the characteristics, constraints, and outcomes of consumption. You can find a searchable data catalogue on their website, and they do offer open, safeguarded, and secure data, so with different access conditions depending on the sensitivity of the information contained in the dataset. They do offer some training as well in data analytics, mainly on how to use R and GIS. And I strongly suggest you check their website out, where there's more information about it, and it's cdrc.ac.uk. And now I'm going to hand over to Les, who's going to talk to you more about his research.
Hello, my name is Les Dolega, and I'm going to talk today about e-resilience of UK retail centres. This is a project I've been working on for about the last 18 months or so. So I will start with a bit of a background on the retail sector in the UK and the evolution of retail town centres in the UK. Then I will introduce the e-resilience concept and move on to the empirical analysis of and research outputs. Lastly, I will outline the value added by this study. So let's start with a bit of information about retail sector in the UK. Many commentators claim that Britain is a nation of shopkeepers, okay, or that shopping is a national pastime. So there must be something to it. as the UK retail sector has been very successful over the past 25 to 30 years. And it's an important part of UK's economy. There are almost 3 million people working in retailing at the moment, which is about 10% of the UK workforce. Retail sales stood at £7.1 billion per week last year in 2015, and this is an equivalent of 21% of UK's GDP. And as you can see, it's a massive chunk of that GDP. On average, we make about 200 shopping trips per year, which comes to about just under 4 shopping trips per week. There are various shopping destinations, but in this study, I will look mainly at town centers and shopping centers. So let's start with the evolution of town centers. Town centers, they constantly evolve, and this is viewed as a good thing. Sometimes that allows them to adapt to things like shifting consumer demand or external, internal shocks. In the UK, the evolution has been driven by 4 major forces. The first of which is competition from out-of-center large retail development. This type of developments have largely resulted from the policies of Thatcher's government and a loose approach to planning system. The so-called vitality and viability of UK town centers was only prioritized in the mid-1990s by adoption of the so-called sequential test, which prioritized retail developments within town centers, followed by edge-of-center, district centers, and only as a last resort, out-of-town sites. Then we've got the second force, which is a shock of the economic crisis and the following era of austerity. In broad terms, the impact was complex, but it was largely associated with sharp increases in vacancy rates. The average vacancy rate in England and in the UK had increased from about 8% in the pre-crisis period, sort of 2007-8, to 14.5% in 2012. And since then, it was gradually declining, and it stands at the moment at about 12%. Then we've got the changing demographics and consumer culture. These include some trends that have been going on for some time, such as aging society or decreasing household size. However, really interesting here are the recent trends, such as increased demands for value for money or progressive rise of convenience culture. That's why we can see in our high streets an increasing number of Poundlands, Savers, Home Bargains, or convenience stores such as Tesco Express or Sainsbury's Local. And then we've got the fourth force, rapid growth of online sales. Online sales have essentially tripled over the past 7-8 years, and now they exceed 15% of total UK retail sales. And I have to say this is the highest figure in the entire world. This can be nicely symbolized by Amazon having become the country's 8th largest retailer. The major retailers, they have adapted to that change relatively quickly. The traditional store-based retailers, we call them sometimes bricks and mortar, transferred part of their business online, which was relatively easy. And this new business model is also referred to as bricks and clicks. However, it is worth mentioning that this transformation wasn't as successful for many smaller and independent retailers. And what is really interesting here, shown on this bottom graph, there we go, here, is that the online penetration rates, they vary considerably by retail or service sector. The sales of products that can be easily digitized, such as music, films, games, or software, take place mainly online nowadays. And at the other end of the spectrum, these types of retail services that provide some sort of experience, such as health and beauty or leisure services, There are also products that we like to expect in person physically, such as groceries. So, what is the research question? Well, I was interested in the response of UK town centres to the increasing online sales. So far, most researchers have focused on supply factors, and as a result, the geography of online sales was little understood. So I've addressed that issue and answered some of other questions as well, related to both supply and demand factors. And in particular, there were these two questions. Go here. How the structure of traditional high streets is being impacted by consumers' propensity for online shopping. And a second question, how resilience of retail centers can be measured in a meaningful, useful, helpful way. The novel thing about this research was that we employed big data from various sources in order to examine the propensity for online shopping at local level area. We estimated the exposure of retail centers to online shopping, and we estimated retail catchments at a national extent. So let's have a quick look at the concept of resilience. Retail resilience is a novel concept, a concept that defines the vulnerability of British retail centers to the effects of rapidly growing internet sales. In other words, it's a concept that defines and measures the impact of online sales on more traditional retailers and traditional high streets in the UK. So as this is a novel concept, the study required a theoretical framework, but also a robust method of how resilience can be measured. So the empirical study consisted of the following parts, which are listed here. It was the estimation of catchment areas for UK retail centers. It was the obtaining of internet user classification at small area level. That was the LSOA, lower super output area level. There was the assessment of the exposure of retail centers to online shopping and estimation of retail supply vulnerability. And I will talk about those in a minute in more detail. So let's start with the theoretical framework. So the resilience is about both supply and demand factors. On the supply side, we have connectivity, which essentially is available infrastructure to get online, and we proxy this by speed and rurality. And on the demand side, we have consumer behavior and essentially the decision of whether or not to shop online. Okay, that's very crucial, whether or not to shop online. And this decision depends on customers' engagement with information and communication technologies, so-called ICT, but also on the catchment demographics. In particular, factors like age and socioeconomic status turn out to be very important. That decision of whether or not to shop online is also closely related to retail supply factors. Here in this box here. And we looked at things like retail center attractiveness, safety, accessibility, shopping convenience. So the assumption was if the retail center offers a safe, convenient shopping environment, one which is really attractive, the center will be more resilient. So let's have a look at our data. Firstly, supply, then demand data. So overall, there are about 1,300 town centers in the UK and twice as many shopping centers and retail parks. The map on the right shows spatial distribution of these town centers, 13,000 town centers, depicted by their size. And as you can see, the size of London, it's much bigger than any other center. Not even any other center is close to that, so that size is completely. In terms of retail occupancy data, we got it from local data company. Another supplier of such data is Goat Experian. This data provides detailed information on the location of all retail and service units and the different classifications. There is a broad classification which includes these 4 categories: comparison, convenience, services, and vacant. Comparison retailing essentially is the non-food retailing. Convenience retailing is the food-related retailing. We've got services and vacant, which are our empty units. And there is also a much more detailed classification with more than 100 categories. And in here you will have categories like convenience stores, supermarkets, shoemakers, post offices, estate agents, and so on and so on. We also used 4.7 million unit postcode level internet speed test results, which are available from broadbandspeedchecker.co.uk. And we also used distances from the nearest mobile masts, the so-called base stations. In terms of demand data, I have to say that the data were assembled at the 2011 lower layer super output areas, so-called LSOAs, LSOA level, okay, which comprises over 34,000 zones in England and Wales of between 1,000 and 3,000 people. So each LSOA had about 1,000 to 3,000 people in it. So firstly, a range of socio-demographic indicators from the 2011 census was collated, including levels of education, employment sector, prevalence of full-time students, age structure, and population density. And secondly, the Oxford Internet Institute survey, the so-called OXIS, were employed. That was a sample for the whole Great Britain with a sampling method that enabled the projection of estimates to the whole country and comparison over time at LSOA level. Again. So, one of the first steps was after the conceptual framework, it was estimation of retail catchment areas. So the aim was to estimate catchment areas for a national network of retail centers. This is a complex task and one that requires a large degree of generalization and a substantial computational power, to say the least. Okay? So traditionally, there are 2 types of methods used to estimate retail catchments. There are the simple methods, such as buffers or drive distances or drive times. They are still popular and used by many retailers. However, they are unlikely to sufficiently capture the complexity of different attributes that may influence true catchment extent. So our preferred approach was to use spatial interaction models, the so-called gravity or probabilistic models. This type of models, they apply Newtonian laws of physics to the modeling of shoppers' behavior based on the influence and the attractiveness of the store or retail center or network of retail centers. And that influence declines with distance between origin and shopping destination. These types of models, they provide much more accurate catchment areas. However, one of the major limitations is that there is a need for some sort of customer insight data in order to calibrate the model. Otherwise, we end up using only arbitrary values, which is not might end up with irrelevant output. So here is the half probability model. We use a bespoke version of it, and in here you've got the formula of that model and got a graphical representation, just to help you to understand how that model works. So the simple version of HOOF, I calculated the probability P for each customer's location I, in our case these were LSOAs, of using a particular center J. Okay, so we calculate the probability P for customers' locations I of using retail center J. And this turned out to be a function between retail center attractiveness A and a distance D between the actual retail centers and consumer domicile. Of course, you can disaggregate that model model parameters into things like large, small, medium town centers. We used in about 5 or 6 parameters in that case. This is just a simple version of it. So then we have some outputs and model calibration as well depicted here on these two figures. So we can see here Manchester on the top and Birmingham on the bottom. So the output looks quite reasonable, I have to say. It looks quite good, in fact. In red we have the primary catchments, in orange we have the secondary, and in yellow the tertiary catchment. So for the catchment for for Manchester city centre, it's really large, and the catchments for the surrounding satellite towns are much smaller. But in terms of model calibration, I used Axiom's data on shopping flows. These are origin-destination matrices derived from surveys on non-food primary shopping destinations. Okay, non-food primary shopping destinations. By creating the probabilities for each LSOA, I mapped Axiom's data. Are the real-world catchments, if you like, and these are on the left-hand side. And that was quite easy to compare against our model output, which is on the right-hand side. Overall, the correlation was just around 90%, which is quite good. However, the inner city location, the response rate was relatively low, and therefore we've got this fragmented picture, as the error tends to be higher in that central area. And we published the results of this study in the Journal of Retailing and Consumer Services. So if you want to have a look, please do so. Then we've got the Internet user classification. It is a purpose-built classification of Internet use and engagement. And we use k-means clustering method. And we employed 3 major blocks of data. These were Oxford Internet surveys, I already mentioned those before, the so-called OXIS, Internet enabling infrastructures, and social demographic indicators from the 2011 census. And an example of such classification is shown in these maps for Liverpool and London. So you go Liverpool and then you go London. There are 11 major groups that engage with ICT in completely different ways. So each of these groups, which is here, they engage in different ways with information communication technology. Also, what it means that some of these groups will be engaging in online shopping more than other groups. In London, there is a quite distinctive spatial pattern, but in Liverpool, it's not that clear. And here I've got one of these rendered pictures of Internet user classification. It looks like satellite picture or something like that, London by night, but it's not. It's Internet user classification. It's just different types of rendering. And then we've got consumers' propensity for online shopping. So as you can see on this graph here on the right-hand side, nationally rates of online shopping equate to 53%. So this is our zero, basically, in fact, and here we're showing the differences from the national mean. And so there are clear differences between different IUC groups. These are the same groups as I showed in the previous map. So for example, the low density but high connectivity group, which is here, and the other 2 groups called constrained by infrastructure, fringe, are most likely to engage in online shopping. Whereas uncommitted and casual users, marginals, all these 3 or 4 groups here, are less likely to engage in online shopping. So having the information for the whole country, we could create catchment profiles based on that classification. And having catchment profiles for every single town center, we could create an index of high exposure. And this map here on the left-hand side provides evidence that predominantly the secondary and tertiary retail centers located around major metropolitan areas reveal the greatest exposure to the impacts of online sales. This trend has been reiterated in other parts of the country, although to a smaller extent. So all the bigger metropolitan areas such as Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds will have similar trends, but to a slightly smaller extent. What's also very interesting is that none of the big centers, town centers, city centers was classified as highly exposed. They were all basically like commuter belt in South East England. And then we've got vulnerability to online shopping. I used the evidence from literature and I calculated a composite measure of retail centers' vulnerability based on supply factors. Essentially, these were data on retail occupancy. So I look at the proportion of different retail types, broader, more detailed categories, and calculated the indices. So what you need to know here that there were two types of impacts easily distinguished. So there was a positive impact for anchor stores and leisure units, as if a center had relatively many anchor stores and quite rich leisure units, this center was much more likely to be resilient, as people were much more likely to come to this center and stay a bit longer. Also, leisure units, leisure offer, it's very difficult to digitize. Okay, and there was a negative weight of the so-called digitalization retail. These were the types of retail services that have high online penetration levels. So just to recap, higher proportions of digitalization retail were associated with enhanced vulnerability, whereas higher proportions of anchor stores and leisure units indicated greater resilience to online sales. So by exploring and then intersecting the exposure and vulnerability indices, I could calculate the e-resilience scores for each retail centers. And here I've got the two tables showing 10 most and 10 least e-resilience town centers in the UK. The final scores were scaled into the range, between 1 and 100 for the clarity reasons. So it can be seen quite clearly, what is the score and where that center is placed in that index between 100 and 1. And here we've got a flow diagram of the way we calculated the resilience scores. So just to recap again, we had this, on the left-hand side, we had these OXIS surveys, census, and internet infrastructure data. And based on this data, we came up with these internet user classifications, the so-called IUC, by using k-means clustering method. And on the other hand, we had this local data company data, town center boundaries data, and road network. So by using this data, I was able to calculate retail catchments for every town center in the country by using the bespoke half model. In stage 2, using those two intent users classification and retail catchments, I could calculate index of high exposure to online shopping, and directly from this data I could calculate index of supply vulnerability. And by intersecting those two indices, I came up with this e-resilience measure, which I just showed you before. And the results of this study were published in Geoforum quite recently. So what is the value added of this study? Well, the study provides new insights into the debate on impacts of online retailing on traditional brick and mortar retailers. It also tries to rebalance the current debates, which has focused on supply factors. So I'm trying to show the importance of demand factors as well, which in other words are the geodemographics. The study investigates how the resistance to impact of online sales can be measured and what role local demographics may have in that context. Okay, and the study also offers valuable tools for various stakeholders. Basically, people who are engaged in revaluation of retail capacity models, or people who are engaged in different schemes of improving town center performance will find this tool pretty useful. And all these models, all tools are open source, so they're freely available online. And the last slide, it's about next steps. So at the moment, I'm working on updating retail center boundaries. As the official DCLG, Department for Communities and Local Government Boundaries, which we used, were from 2004, which is quite old, but that's the official boundaries we have at the moment. So the extent has changed in many cases quite significantly. So, for this reason, we are updating these boundaries by also creating a new method which will be more robust and will be much easier to rerun the model and update town center boundaries, let's say, on an annual basis after each survey or something like that. The second project I'm working on at the moment is related to e-resilience, is revaluation of retail catchments based on variable propensity for online shopping. So the current catchment model assumes uniform propensity for online shopping, which in other words doesn't account for it at all. Okay, so the e-resilience project provides empirical evidence that variable propensity can have an impact on catchment extent. So it would be useful to rerun the model using our e-resilience score. And you've got two maps in here showing that's how catchment for Gloucester, how this e-resilience can impact potentially the catchment extent. And we also are working on evaluation of our model using consumer insight data. We have quite lots of data on the CDRC website. So one of these data set is about click and collects from one of the major retailers, and we will use that data to evaluate our models. And thank you very much.
I'm going to thank you for presenting today. And I'm going to thank all the attendees. I hope you found it interesting, and have a good afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This is Jerry. Jerry's been drooling over this new Sony digital camera that costs $80 and wants to get the best deal. Jerry finds out about Taposity.com and creates a free account. He then tells us about the digital camera he wants to buy. His listing is sent to hundreds of merchants who sell the exact camera he wants. 60 merchants pay Taposity $3 each to make Jerry an offer, and I'll send him their lowest prices. Jerry picks the best deal and buys the camera from the retailer's website. Once Jerry and the merchant confirm that the purchase is complete, Taposity sends Jerry a check for half the amount we collected from all the merchants who paid us to make him an offer. Because 60 merchants paid $3 each, we collected $180. After splitting this in half, Jerry earns $90, which covers the entire cost of the camera and actually makes him a profit of $10. Taposity is the newest way to buy brand name consumer goods and is 100% free for the consumer. Use the form to the right to create a free account and then tell us what you want to buy. We will send your listing to hundreds of merchants, and you will see what Taposity can do for you.